This episode of the Operatory podcast is brought to you by Opera DDS, the easy solution for communication in your dental practice, between dental practices, and with your specialists. Paperless forms, secure email, full recall, and intra-office communication with chat and teledentistry, all available at operadds.com. Welcome to the Operatory, the podcast about burying the dinosaurs in dentistry, moving past outdated technology and procedures to find a better way. With me, as always, is the man himself, providing the patient perspective, which is so needed today, David Pryor.
Hey, good morning, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing well. And we always kind of start off our podcast talking about the topic we're going to discuss today.
All right.
And the topic today is probably one of the most boring topics that
I could not be more excited. Something more boring than anything in dentistry. I am set.
It's not even in dentistry. Just generally speaking, it's one of the most, like, when you say this, people just go,
Okay.
It's meetings, Dave.
Oh.
See, I told you. It's meetings.
Is it the abundance of meetings that are pointless?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's really what makes a good meeting versus a bad meeting.
Yes.
You know, I go to talk to dental offices all the time, and people, one office is like, boy, that morning huddle it's the most important part of the day. Those 15 minutes where we talk before patients roll in and start complaining about them is so important. and I'm talking about you complaining, Dave.
Yeah.
Because you're our patient, right?
Yes.
Or other offices are like, man, I don't know why anybody has. I roll in 15 minutes after the team is actually going, and then I just walk in and just do dentistry. I don't need to know what's going on, right? And that's not just true of morning huddles at dental practices. It's true of quarterly meetings with your team or meetings with your hygienist or any meeting ever. It doesn't matter if you're in dentistry. There's really, I think, one singular difference between good meetings and bad meetings. And that comes down to really, if you're looking for ways to catalyze, to initiate change for the better. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So, even if in a morning huddle, when you're talking with your team, if you weren't looking to improve things, it's just gonna be just like yesterday. But that incremental change that leads to the progression towards perfection, you can never get there, but is really what is the determination between a good meeting and a bad meeting. Would you agree, sir?
I think that's a really good perspective. I like it.
Yeah, and so then, obviously there's, how do we do that? How do we initiate change for the better? I'd like to get your perspective on that, Mr. Patient Friend, sir.
Well, if you had asked me before you had said that, what makes a good meeting that I see lacking so often, I would have said an agenda.
An agenda.
Yep. If you're not going into a meeting with an agenda and everybody on the same page on that agenda, so everybody being clear of what the agenda of the meeting is about, I think that is it's something that's so simple but gets missed so often. Well, and
I let me extrapolate for you, if I may, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Okay.
Sort of the danger of not having agenda is the tangent.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, absolutely.
The tangent, and which is so desirable.
Yes.
Right? It's fun. It's exciting. And it leads to bad meetings.
Yes.
Right?
And nothing getting accomplished.
Yes. We have I may have mentioned it on the podcast before, but oftentimes in our leadership meetings, we have a little stuffed seagull, which often is used to throw at somebody if they're seagull managing, which means I have a job, you swoop in, you crap all over it, and then you swoop away, right? So you can chuck the seagull at somebody's head. But oftentimes the seagull, probably more often, is used for the tangent. even though we all have stuffed seagulls, so that you're basically trying to tell somebody how to do their job when you have no accountability for it. And so you're really just like pushing them to do things your way when you have no idea what the hell they're doing. So it just, that's a whole nother podcast, seagull managing, right?
Yep.
But this one is about, so that's the purpose of the seagull in the meeting. But when you have to use more often, it's like, it's the temptation of, oh, you saw Game of Thrones last night, right?
Yeah.
And then doop, and you don't stay on the agenda,
Sure.
which is, the agenda is really just, all it is an outline to keep you on track so that you don't go down the black hole of tangents. Do you agree?
I agree. And I think it's also a good way to measure, did the meeting meet everybody's expectations? So if at the end of your meeting you look at the agenda and say, well, we didn't cover half of this, and did you go off on a bunch of tangents, or was there not enough time for that meeting? So it's a way to grade your meeting as well.
And what do we do? What do we do at the end of every meeting at Opera Dave?
Well, let's grade this meeting.
Rate the meeting.
How did it go? How did you feel about this? Give it a score, 1 to 10.
1 to 10. And so there's 2 rules. You have to give it a rating.
Yep.
And what's the second rule?
Second rule is if it's below an 8, is it an 8?
7.
7. If it's below a 7, you've got to give a reason as to why.
And really it is 8, because if you say 8, everybody's going, well, why didn't you give it a 9, right?
Right.
So yeah. Which is very helpful. I would recommend that for everybody to rate the meeting, because that's what's the purpose of rating the meeting?
Well, it's so that everybody makes sure that their agenda expectations were met.
Incremental positive change.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Because if you say 6, because Brian, you showed up 5 minutes late, what I'm going to think, ooh, next time I have to show up on time, incremental progress, which is the only reason to have a meeting.
Yep.
If all you're doing is like cascading information, email works better. Sometimes you have to have meetings for cultural purposes. If you have a large team, get them together, party time, woohoo, yeah, we're all the greatest. Yeah, and here's where we are. So that's a different type of, that's more of a celebration, I would say, or cultural experience. It's not really a meeting where you're trying to get incremental progress, which is really what we're discussing here, where people think it's like a waste of time. Nobody feels like getting together and just celebrating is a waste of time. Well, maybe some people do, but that's a whole different issue. But really staying on task, like you're saying with an agenda, is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
The other piece, I believe, is what we do is we bring up issues and we prioritize them, and then we hit them, highest priority down, with the idea that we try to get to some type of permanent solution or a deep type. Is there an underlying issue to the issue via, this traction or EOS, where if there's a problem that we're going to be discussing or an issue, we don't want to just kind of come up with a quick answer. We want to get to the deeper solve. What's the core issue that's going on, that if we address that, we'll never have to talk about this again. And that is incredibly hard to do sometimes.
Yes, it is.
And that gets me to the second piece of a good meeting, which leads to incremental progress. The agenda is what you were thinking. The other piece that I was thinking of is, I heard the term today, radical candor. And I thought, that's what true meetings are about, is being radically candor with each other, being direct, honest, feedback. And to do that, everybody has to be open for getting arrows chucked at them. Do you agree?
Yeah, but, my life is full of radical candor. So.
Well, you and I are probably friends because we have a love of radical candor to begin with, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But part of that is not just giving, as you are so good at, but also receiving, as you are actually you're good at, particularly on this podcast.
Yeah.
Now I have to ask, because everybody mentions to me with the podcast, the Mountain Dew.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes you have like a big jug of like the super soaker level of, I don't know what it's called, from the convenience store of soda of some kind.
It's called a fountain drink, Brian.
A fountain drink, yes. Well, some of us don't drink fountain drinks because we care about what we put into our body. But you now have this like neon colored can of soda on the desk. blazoned with the Mountain Dew logo. Is that on purpose today?
I've
Dave?
changed it up a little bit because there's a limited time availability of Mountain Dew Baja Blast that is normally only available at Taco Bell.
I don't want anything blasting into my mouth, Dave. That's Baja Blast. Oh man, it's just like it's
The
just,
dentist is telling me he doesn't want anything blasting into his mouth as he whips out all sorts of crap that will do that.
Speaking of tangents,
Yes.
yeah. So, oh boy, there's a lot to unpack there. But getting back to radical candor, which is what the whole point was. I was trying to give you some direct feedback on your beverage choices, Dave.
Great,
So
Brian.
thank you for being open to that. But I think oftentimes dentists as leaders, by definition, if you're going to be leading a care team, you're a leader. We don't want to get the direct feedback. If you're tired and had a stressful day, and an assistant or a hygienist or somebody at the business center comes up and gives you direct feedback, it might not be the time or place.
Yeah.
And so that's the other piece of meetings that I think is really good. Letting people know that this is the time and place for direct candor. Because if you catch me in between patients and you give me direct feedback, I'm not going to be able to receive it in the way that it's intended.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a really, really good point. I think that you have to schedule those times to give people that opportunity to be radically candid with you and have them know when is an appropriate time and when is not.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily an ego thing.
No.
But first of all, recognizing that, yes, for us as a team to do our best, we all have to be open and direct and honest.
Well, and I think that in dentistry specifically, you're really focused on what you're doing at the time you're doing it. So for somebody to shake you out of your headspace and then have you adapt to the fact that they're giving you some feedback that you might not be ready for can be disruptive to your day in a big way. And so I agree. I think setting up a scheduled time to be able to have radical feedback available to you is it's smart.
And then being open at that time.
Yep.
And just go, okay, this is the time to be radically candid. And you want to be direct and open and honest as much as possible throughout the day. But if somebody has maybe some constructive criticism, and that's the other piece of this, is if you're going to be radically candid, you better make sure you have a point.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to be very direct and if it's going to be very sort of, we don't want this to be negative. It's got to be looking for positive incremental change. Saying you're a slob doesn't help anybody. We want to say this in a boy, maybe I've been thinking about it. Maybe we should get your jackets pressed. I've had people say that to me because I could be a slob if I didn't get that criticism back from I should say direct feedback from other people. And if I didn't listen to them, I would always walk around looking like I'd be wearing flip-flops and so getting that, looking for that, actively seeking it out. And another thing is that even if you are the type of person that is looking for direct feedback, you understand that and you set time set aside for it. If you hire a new assistant that's worked in a practice for 15 years, that practice most practices aren't open for looking to make incremental positive change through having effective meetings with a tight agenda and rating them and looking how to make things better every day like we try to do on this podcast, right? And so that person might come with preconceived notions of what meetings are, and that has to be directly addressed on the front end. Look, and your feedback is not just okay here, it's desired. We want you to let us know how we can change, and this is the way we do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's a big piece that even those of us who are, I was watching a video this morning and I saw that and I thought, boy, that's something that I could bring into my own office, that when we hire somebody, have that as part of the onboarding process to say, this is the way our meetings work. Here's why. We want your, even though you're new here, your opinion's always valued. Can't say we're going to do what you want us to do, but everybody as a team is going to be open and honest and listen and have a frank discussion. and this is how we do it.
Yeah. I think you provide that environment, at least on the software side of things. You certainly do that.
Yeah.
That I have opinions that oftentimes aren't listened to, or oftentimes aren't acted on, but they're always listened to.
Yeah.
So it's a good environment to have that.
And oftentimes it could be because you just have a really bad idea. No, I'm just kidding.
Most of the time, that's the case.
No, but it could also be not the time or place, given all the other things going on, right?
Yep.
And we have that discussion all the time too. Like, oh yeah, great idea. However, we
Takes
have
us
to
up.
focus,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
It's the equivalent of having a tangent in a meeting.
Yeah.
Love to talk about Game of Thrones. You got to stay on task,
Yeah.
though, right? Cool. Well, thank you very much for a very efficient, incrementally progressive, radically candorous.
No. Candid, I think, is
Candid,
the word you're
yes, that's
looking
right.
for.
Radically candid podcast, sir. Appreciate it. Always, not just from the patient perspective today, but also from somebody who's been in lots of meetings with me. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
I also want to remind you to rate and review us wherever you're listening to this podcast. And if you have suggestions or comments, please visit theoperatory.com and drop us a line. Again, I'm Dr. Brian Laskin, host of The Operatory. Thanks for listening. I look forward to speaking with you next week.